Hello, time travelers. Your life is a simulation, not digital, you see, but divine. Imagine 5 long centuries, 500 years, where every single thought you had was programmed. Every fear, was engineered. Every coin, taxed by God's self-appointed accountants, right? You think you're free? In the medieval world, you just a line of code in a massive, stone-built operating system. This wasn't just a church. It was a total monopoly on the human experience. You lived in the mud, prayed for a salvation you couldn't afford, and let the cathedral felt worse like a building and more like an anchor, pinning you to the earth. Here's the terrifying part. If you defined the code, you weren't a rebel. No, you were a glitch. And glitches? Well, they get deleted. Tonight, we are pulling back the curtain on the divine simulation. We're breaking down the 4 pillars of control, those 4 lines of code that kept kings on their knees and peasants in the dirt. Pay attention, because by the end of this journey, you'll ask yourself, was it actually history, or just a script? Let's hack the medieval matrix. Hello, time travelers. Forget the gentle sanctuary you saw in those dusty textbooks. You see, that's just the sanitized version the victor sold you. They say the church was a flickering candle in the dark? Wrong. It was the only light allowed to burn because they blew everyone else's out. 476 AD. Rome collapses. Total system failure. Europe was like a laptop with no OS, right? Just a hardware shell waiting for a program. And the church? Well, they didn't just offer a reboot. They staged a hostile takeover of the human soul. Think of it as the ultimate software update. They moved into the palaces, stole the emperor's chair, and installed the brand new reality. Your life wasn't yours anymore. You know, your time, regulated by their bowels. Your money, siphoned through mandatory tithes to fund a golden empire you'd never enter. Your thoughts, encrypted in Latin code only the system admins could read. You were trapped in a closed-loop reality where they held the only exit key. But who were the architects behind this global server? Who were the men moving the pieces on this continental chessboard? We're going behind the incense and the gold. You see, we're going to find the CEOs of the divine script. Because here's the terrifying truth. If you control a man's soul, you don't need to chain his body. But what happens when the system starts to demand more than just your faith? What happens when the operating system starts demanding your blood? Stay tuned, time travelers, because the next 5 minutes will change how you see history forever. Welcome back, time travelers. You see, if the medieval world was a simulated reality, then the Vatican? It was the server room. And the men inside? They weren't just priests. They were the ultimate psychological architects. To understand how they held the entire world in a metaphorical headlock, we have to look at the men who actually wrote the script. Think of figures like Pope Innocent III. He didn't just want to lead religion, right? No, he wanted to manage the human race. Innocent III viewed the world through a cold, systemic lens. To him, you weren't an individual with dreams, rights, or even a private life. You were just a single cell in the Corpus Christianum, the great collective body of Christendom. In this mindset, the individual was irrelevant. Only the survival of the system mattered. And if the cell became infected with independent thought, well, it had to be purged for the sake of the operating system. But every system needs a logic to back it up. A language that makes the impossible seem rational. Enter the scholastics. These were the high-level coders of the Middle Ages. They spent their lives in stone chambers, writing the legal and philosophical scripts that made the church's power seem like a law of nature. They didn't just study God. They engineered reality where every single human action, from the way you farmed your land to the way you spoke to your neighbor, was governed by their specific code. The psychological brilliance of this architecture was a concept we now call divine right. By positioning the Pope as the sole bridge between the mortal world and the divine, they effectively made the papacy the CEO of Western civilization. Think about the sheer scale of that power. I mean, even the most ruthless kingsmen who commanded thousands of knights and sat on thrones of jewel lived in the state of constant, low-level terror. Why? Because the Pope held the admin keys, you see. With one stroke of a pen, he could issue an interdict, a spiritual blackout that shut down all church services in an entire kingdom. No marriages, no burials, no baptisms. In the mind of a medieval peasant, this was a death sentence for their soul. The Pope could turn a king's own subjects against him in 24 hours, without ever picking up a sword. It was the ultimate kill switch. The masters of the code had successfully hacked the minds of the elite, turning emperors into middle managers. But they still faced one massive, glaring problem. The vast majority of the population, the millions of peasants working the fields, live in the mud. They couldn't read the heavy Latin tomes of the scholastics. I mean, they couldn't understand the complex legal frameworks being built in Rome, right? So, how do you maintain absolute, total control over a population that can't even read your laws? The answer lies in the source code itself. And let me tell you, it's far more visual and more terrifying than you can possibly imagine. Welcome back, time travelers. Imagine waking up, but the instructions for your own existence, they're encrypted. You see, to a medieval peasant, Latin wasn't just a dead language, it was a firewall. The church held the actual source code of reality, a Bible, and they kept it under a total literacy lockdown for 1,000 years. Think about it, right? If you can't read the manual, you are 100% dependent on the technician. In this medieval matrix, the priest was the only authorized admin for your soul. They tell you to pay a sin fee to save your dead relatives? You pay it. I mean, why? Because you can't exactly view source. You just exactly update, or you burn. But against Docker, you know, they didn't just own your mind. They owned your time. Forget your iPhone. In this system, the church steeple was the ultimate surveillance tool. Those bells? That was the rhythm heartbeat of the matrix, dictating when you ate, worked, and even when you slept. There was zero, and I mean zero, private time. The calendar was a tactical masterstroke, a loop of feast days designed to keep you predictable. If you stepped out of rhythm, you weren't just a rebel. You were a glitch, a systemic error that had to be debugged before you infected the collective. How do you control someone when the bells stop ringing? How do you ensure the code stays locked inside their brain, even in total darkness? The answer is a psychological masterclass that turned every peasant into their own warden. And it starts with a concept so terrifying. Most people still can't even say its name. Stop. Forget rent. Forget taxes. Imagine paying for time. Welcome back, time travelers, to the 12th century, where the church just dropped the ultimate expansion pack. Purgatory. You see, it wasn't just theology. It was a pay-to-win subscription model for your very soul. Think about it. Your mother was trapped in a waiting room of fire. I mean, wouldn't you pay any price to fast-track her to here? That was the indulgence a century, the world's first microtransaction. It was brilliant. It was lucrative. And it was building massive cathedrals out of the coins of the poor, right? But then, the system glitched. People started asking questions. To protect the central server, the church deployed the most terrifying security protocol in history, the Inquisition. If purgatory was the carrot, then the Inquisition is the ultimate firewall. Its job? To identify, isolate, and delete any heretical thought. These weren't just judges. No, they were the system's antivirus software. The foaming system purges all across your one unauthorized update. You know, a new side to a theory or even just a different prayer you viewed as a systemic fiction. The stakes? Total terror. Your neighbor, your friend, even your family. They were all potential whistleblowers for the system admins. Actually, the church achieved the impossible. Total ownership of your life, your money, and your eternity. It was a perfect, closed-loop system until the fateful vulnerability appeared, something the creators never saw coming. It wasn't a hero, an army, or a king. It was a single, noisy machine that was about to crash the entire server and reboot reality forever. Trust me, you aren't ready for what happens when the code breaks. Time travelers, listen carefully, because 1347 was the year that medieval Matrix just hit total blue screen duff. For 500 years, you see, the church held the admin password to reality itself. Their promise is simple: follow our code or burn. Then, the virus hit. I mean, not digital biological. And the church's so-called divine firewall? Well, it was completely useless. The Black Death wasn't just a plague. It was a total system crash. Imagine the absolute terror. You're told illness is a punishment for sin, right? And then you see the holy priests dropping dead even faster than the sinners. You see the pattern? The source code of the universe had a glitch they couldn't patch with holy water. The screen went static. The illusion was shattering in real time. But pay attention, because while the hardware was failing, a massive hack was being prepared to rewrite your soul forever. Enter Johannes Gutenberg. 1450. Before him, the church had a 100% monopoly on data. I mean, books were encrypted in Latin, a language you couldn't even speak. They had the keys. And you? You had nothing. Gutenberg's printing press? That, my friends, was the ultimate zero-day exploit. This wasn't just a tech shift. It was the largest data breach in human history. Suddenly, the source code was leaked into the common tongue. The secrets were out. Imagine the chaos. A farmer reads the rules for himself and realizes the church has been charging hidden fees and microtransactions for salvation. The matrix was pixelating. People were no longer just users. They were becoming developers. The church tried to delete the files, of course burning books, silencing whistleblowers. But you can't. CMD plus Z, 1,000,000 copies. The modern world was coded from the ashes of the old reality. But here is the truly terrifying part. While the masses thought they were finally free, a new group of architects was already waiting in the shadows. They were building a new simulation. And this one, well, it wasn't built on faith. It was built on something much more dangerous. Are you ready to see who really wrote the new code? The Middle Ages never ended. I mean, it just got a software update. Think about it, time travelers. In the 12th century, the church owned your soul because they owned the information. If you dare to speak against the narrative, well, you weren't just wrong. You were deleted. Sound familiar? Fast forward to right now. The stone cathedrals? They've been replaced by massive server farms in Silicon Valley. The priests? They've traded their robes for hoodies and call themselves engineers, right? They don't whisper in Latin anymore, no, they write in proprietary code, a language you aren't even allowed to see. But one that decides exactly what you believe. It's the same trap, you see. Just a different cage. Back then, they used the fear of hell. Today, it's the fear of being unplugged. We're terrified of the digital silence, never realizing our reality is curated by black box algorithm we stained as loose peasant understood people bull. Here's the mind-blowing part. The part they don't want you to see. The architects didn't leave. They just rebranded. Your data is the new currency. And your attention? Well, that's your tithe. You're living in digital feudalism. Look closer. Is that the world? Or just a high-tech stained glass window? There's a glitch in their system. And the glitch? Right. It's you. Your skepticism is the virus. Ready to crash the program? Stay curious. Stay dangerous. And subscribe. And let's rip the veil off because the era of the official version is over.